Hello, my name is Robert. This is a instructional video on PTZ cameras. The PTZ stands for pan, tilt, zoom. This is a camera that gives you the ability from the remote location, basically from the camera, of moving the camera and focusing in on something that you're more interested in seeing. This is a typical pan, tilt, zoom camera. They're typically mounted upside down with the camera up under a protective dome. As you can see here, this is just a little quick sketch. On any camera, including the pan, tilt, zoom, you've got a video line that carries the video signal from the camera back to the DVR. And then you have a power line that carries power to the camera so that the camera can run. The difference between a PTZ connection and a standard analog camera is you have to have a control wire. And the control wires is basically just a twisted pair of wires, generally 22 to 24 gauge wire. And these signals come from this to the DVR or the recording device, and through that wire send signals that have the camera move. If you're using a PTZ on a computer-based machine, you're going to have something like this. This is a GB net card. This green connector here is the RS485 connector that these wires attach to. There will be a connector something like this on the camera itself. Generally, it's not critical if you have the wires crossed. If you attach these wires to your DVR, you have everything configured and it won't run. While the machine's running without turning power off, you can switch these connectors over, and many times that's where the problem lies. But this is something that will have to be in the PC based. If you have a standalone based DVR that comes with an RS485 connector, you won't have to do any special configuration, but you will still have to run the wire from the camera to the recording device. Once you have the physical connection done, when you put power onto the to the PTZ camera, the PTZ camera is going to go through a set routine of movement. This is one indicator to you that the camera is functioning the way it should be. Anytime the power goes off, when it comes back on, the camera is going to go through that set routine. Normally, when the PTZ camera comes up on the screen of the recording device, it will have superimposed over the screen, it will have a protocol, an address, and a baud rate. These will come up superimposed on the screen and tell you how the camera is set. What your job is in your recording device, find your camera PTZ setup and put these readings into your device. Now, what you will find on many of the devices, they only have so much room to store so many protocols. For instance, on the Samsung camera, Samsung has multiple protocols depending on the camera you purchase. If you purchase a standalone DVR, it may not have more than 10 or 12 protocols that it supports. If the camera you bought does not have one of those protocols, you're going to have to change the protocol of the camera. And that can be done by a series of dip switches inside the camera. And you will have to pull the camera apart in some cases to get to these. Usually it's under the base plate. In your user's manual for the camera, it will tell you how to position the switches to get to a protocol that will work for the DVR. What you will find on a lot of the systems is there will be a protocol called Pelco. There's two of them. There's a Pelco D and then there's Pelco P. These are a universal protocol that most cameras will work with, and most of your recording devices will also have that available. So if you can't get the camera to move using the protocols setup that is already on the camera, You will need to change the camera to a Pelco D or a Pelco P protocol. The camera I showed earlier, one like this, is going to be a Pelco D for dome. The address will also show on there, and generally the addresses is going to be 101 or 2, something like that. The baud rate is going to be 2400, 4800, or 9600. In your setup for your PTZ camera, you're just going to take whatever you're seeing on here and change it. If the Pelco setup does not allow one of these, then you will need to change the settings in the camera itself on the dip switches. The dip switches are very fine, and you're going to be needing to use a paper clip or something, a very tiny screwdriver, to flip those switches. And we will show you here a close-up of both the RS-45 connector and of the dip switches on the camera I use for the presentation. Once you get all of these set up, PTZ camera can be a very handy device to have on your system. Not everyone uses them, but there seems to be some confusion now and then when people get them on how to set them up. They can't just plug them in and have them go. We have more documentation available for anyone that needs it, but hopefully this will cover the basics well enough that you can get a good idea of what needs to be done. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye. This is the card that goes into a PC-based system when you're going to be running connecting the RS-485. As you can see, there's no connectors on here. This does not actually connect into the motherboard. It's used an open slot on the back of the case. The RS-45, the 2 wires come in. There's screws for just taking the wire straight into one and the other, one positive, one negative. When you're attaching the wire, this snaps out, so that makes it a little easier to put together, and it only goes back in one way, so you can't put it back in wrong. When you're using this card, there's a power connector here, and the kit comes with the connector that will connect to a Molex power connector on your motherboard. If you're going to use USB on it, these are connectors for USB, and there will be a USB connector that plugs in from here to a USB connector on the motherboard. Again, we have documentation that shows you more on how to install this card. You would also have to load some drivers. I mentioned that if you have to change the protocols on your PTZ camera, you would have to change the dip switches on the camera itself. This is a Samsung camera, and right here is the little dip switches along the bottom. They're either toggled on or off. On this particular camera, they have instructions on the different protocols and how to set the switches for those protocols. Some of the switches are for protocols, some of them for address and baud rate. And as I said, this one's pretty handy. It's got all the information right there. On some of them, you'd have to actually look up in the manual for the camera.